and see if everyone still is on board with it. We got reduce inequalities or reduce inequities and disparities in environmental impacts and outcomes regardless of race, gender, and income. Yeah, another one of these, pretty short and sweet, but to the point, and I think recognizably important. But anybody have any thoughts since our last meeting on the objectives specifically?
Sorry. This is Jennifer. I was going to mention this last time when you asked that question, and I decided to let it go, but I read it again. So I'm doing a lot these days with diversity, equity, and inclusion, just reading a lot of literature. And is there a way that this can be written where it doesn't call out race, gender, and income, because there's more to the inequities? There are like other kinds of groups that are also discriminated against. I would say those are the three big ones. But you'll get this problem where people will think they're being excluded because you listed them all out. If they aren't, included, if they are in an underserved community or have a minority identity that doesn't get included by race, gender, and income, like say religion, then they'll start to feel excluded. So I was just wondering, we don't have to deal with this right now in this meeting, but maybe just keep revisiting a way to maybe not list out the underserved communities and thereby not exclude anybody.
No, I mean, this is the forum that we would talk about it. So it's I think that's totally I think it's totally right to bring up here.
I agree. This is Alexia. I agree, Jennifer, completely. And I think a really simple solution would be literally to just delete regardless of race, gender, and income and put a period after outcomes. Because I think the sentence says everything it needs to say without, like you said, listing out anything.
Gotcha. Well, I'm also wondering, as because I do like the simplicity. I'm wondering if we want to kind of call out, like Jennifer said, underserved communities, or if we feel like this alone cutoff would be good enough to get our message across. Which I could see it either way.
This is Alexia again. Leaving it very simply stated the way that it is broadens it to an extent that includes, sort of environmental injustices against endangered species. And so it's not focused strictly and specifically on human needs, but just on the needs of any ecosystem and anything that exists within it.
Is that too broad?
I don't personally think so, because I'm assuming we will hit, immediately food security hits on some things, particularly income, so I think it's fleshed out in further conversation. So to me, it doesn't bother me that it's just super broad, because it is such a complex issue. You start trying to really define it, you can exclude groups without intention.
Yeah, awesome. No, I mean, I totally agree. I know I'm definitely not one of the, probably one of the best voices to even speak on it. Of course, I'm a cis white male, so it's definitely not, my perspective. So I do appreciate the input and guidance here, because, there's a lot to tackle. So I like it. That sounds good, unless anybody else has any other comments there.
Alexia, again, just one more comment on it. If we're working on defining, what sustainability work needs to be done in Nevada, there are definitely areas where specificity is incredibly important. And then there are other areas where, a broader definition leaves the door open for us to evolve and adapt through time into the future, because the sustainability needs that we have now will look different for us in 5 years or 10 years. So I think in this very specific statement, I think keeping it broad is probably more beneficial to our long-term objectives.
Noah and everyone, this is Sandra Carroll. earlier today, I received a message from the League of Conservation Voters, and they are also working on similar project, I think, as far as environmental justice. And what they have said is that they are working toward a better world for all communities and the planet. So just another idea to add to everyone else's great ideas.
Mm. I do like it, but almost to Lauren's point that she put in the chat, we're probably not going to tackle the world's problems, even though we'd love to. I guess it's more tackling Nevada's problems, which, to Lauren's point, we could include that if that's what we want to specify it down to. But I do like it is also a very broad definition, and it's very optimistic, which I always love.
Well, maybe working toward a better world for all communities in Nevada and our planet. Just adding a few more ideas.
And I do like all Nevadans. People like to be identified and kind of called out, and we want to make this a local thing. So I'm in support of that. You start to talk about Earth and the planet and world, and people think that you're some crazy tree hugger that's going to ask them to live. It's not always the case. I know people don't think that way, but some do. I found that with my students in particular. So that's the only reason that I hate to keep going further with the kind of planet or world idea. That's just something I've seen with people that kind of turns them off sometimes.
How do you guys feel about the word reduce? To me, that makes me think that there's some kind of data where we have a point where we are tracking this and we want to reduce inequities and disparities. Is that something you guys are noticing as well, or is that not a concern?
Versus eliminate, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess eliminate, or when I see the word reduce, that just means me think that we need to reduce a number or something, where we have a data point that we need to lower. Again, that may not be a concern. That was just something I was just thinking about when reading this. I want to see what you guys thought of it.
Would leaving the word reduce then require us to compile data so that we actually have measurements of inequities and disparities for environmental, impacts in Nevada? That maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think definitely if we need to call out the need for data collection, I think that's very key. But reduce makes me think that we already have a standing point that we want to then lower. Do you get what I'm saying? Again, maybe it's just a tick that I have, just a consideration.
I mean, I guess my thoughts would be, I think that would be an issue if it wasn't more of a widely known problem that we all know exists. Like if we were saying reduce something that is not so widely known, maybe. But I mean, when I first read it, coming from a layman's perspective, I wouldn't expect numbers, but that could just be me. And then Lauren, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say initially I think I was trying to think of an alternative, and one doesn't immediately come to mind because I think eliminate is way too aspirational, right? But I get Kayla's point about like, how do we measure success of this objective, right? So if we're going to say we achieved it, how do we say what it was and where it is in the future? So I think, I do think data exists for most of the things we do want to, and I'm sure we're going to get to that, these bullet points. I do think data exists for a lot of those things. I know that data exists, maybe not specific to Nevada, but nationally about, access to energy efficiency, renewable energy by race and by gender. I don't know about other categories we might identify. So we could get more specific in each bullet maybe, so that we do have something to measure success. But other than that, I think we definitely want to show some way, but I don't think address does it. And I don't think eliminate is achievable. So if others have
I'm seeing mitigate, diminish. I got diminish again. Minimize. Any thoughts there? I mean, I guess the bigger question overall is: do we want to change this word today, or do we just want to leave it?
I don't know. I feel like. Sorry, go ahead, Alexia.
Sorry. I think it's important that we understand what our goal is, because this really, should speak to what our goal is. So if our goal is to reduce or diminish or mitigate inequities and disparities and environmental impacts and outcomes for all Nevadans, then I think that it's the correct thing to say, but is that actually the goal of this group? Is our goal, instead of to reduce, is it to bring awareness to the inequities for Nevadans? Is it to, I don't know.
I would say it's both, at least within the small scope of the menu of options, it's both to identify and then outline strategies to, I don't know, mitigate, diminish, reduce, whatever word we want to choose for it. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's so much just, bringing education and knowledge of the problems, because, that's, we probably do have data on it, and it's probably not the problem that people don't know about it, but more so that they don't know what to do about it, which I think is where we fit pretty well, if that makes sense.
Maybe adding the language then to identify, outline, and reduce or mitigate might be a little bit more clear.
Yeah,
I think that clarifies it a little bit, and then saying that we need to identify, collect data, and then start to reduce that number, whatever that would look like. Yeah, I think that's great, Alexia.
But it's interesting because this is usually not a huge fan of semantics over words, but I would say that this is probably one of the groups that we should do it in, because I know I'm sure everyone here is like well aware that words do have a pretty big impact on who we're identifying, how we're identifying it. So it's I appreciate the discussion. It might be something that I guess we think about and come back to as well, though, because I think I like identify and then outline strategies to reduce or mitigate, diminish. But we'll take a look at that. We'll think about it, and then probably decide on something maybe in the next meeting or over email, because I do want to get to it. Before I say anything else, I see Sam raise your hand.
Sorry, just one last thing that might help us kind of make that decision is looking at some of the other objectives, maybe from the other working groups, and see how because I'm sure there's similar objectives where they're running into that same issue. Like, do we have that baseline data, and do we think that it's accomplishable? So looking at those and keeping it kind of consistent across the board might be helpful.
Yeah, to touch on that, Sam, we're going to have, eventually the baseline data for every single goal and objective. And if we don't have that data, how do we then collect it or utilize data that's collected from other entities that we could use to support this? So yes, wholeheartedly agree, find the baseline data, and then we'll go from there.
Sweet, but if anyone has any other thoughts that come up, totally feel free to throw them in there, because I know it's not something we can just fit into a 20-minute time slot. But, and then, I don't know, Chris, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I mean, and do we want the words environmental justice in the objective at all or not?
This is Alexia again. That's a very sticky phrase, environmental justice. I'm in favor of protecting the environment, but I'm not in favor of like environmental terrorists. And I think that those words, you know, bring connotations of environmental terrorism to mind.
Okay.
Could I ask, this is Sandra again, now the issue of environmental terrorism, I'm puzzled by that, because for many years now, the term environmental justice has been used to describe programs that are inclusive and that include all communities, and especially communities of color. So I'm not sure what the link is between environmental justice and terrorism. If someone could explain that to me, I'd really appreciate it.
This is Alexia again. I guess I should probably follow up my thought. I think, you know, in terms of people spinning, you know, ideas and agendas that were made, you know, to benefit, you know, society, or, you know, made to work for the greater good of whatever cause it's supporting. It's just been twisted and taken out of context. And I do agree, of course, environmental justice has been used for a very long time, you know, to address what you've just described, but it's also been misused. And so I just think that, you know, maybe it would be a good idea to move, you know, on from that and not use words that have been misused for a very long time. It's just a thought.
Yeah, it seems like more of a historical look, as you know, because history tends to get pretty whitewashed, even in terms of environmental justice, where those kinds of programs have been used to, you know, save or carve out some land for a national park, but you know, that environmental justice for some people ends up getting the native people who actually lived there kicked out of that area. So yeah, I can definitely see where Alexia's coming from when it comes to, you know, the connotations are definitely getting a little complicated. So maybe as straightforward and simple in the words that we use, not using you know, already created terms might be a good idea here, but I don't know.
Okay.
But sweet, yeah, no, but I do appreciate you bringing it up, because it's a complicated issue. So I like everybody's perspective on it. Are there any thoughts, you know, as we're reading through the actual objectives that we've laid out here, which are you know, pretty straightforward, and I think really good topics to work off of. Is there any more that anyone's thought of, you know, since our last meeting? Any kind of information we'd like to use to expound upon any of these ideas? You know, what are people's thoughts?
Yeah, I have several. If we're identifying food security as one, I think we need to identify access to energy efficiency, renewable energy, green spaces, access to clean energy workforce, living wage jobs. Yeah,
Say them
jobs
again.
typically within the clean energy workforce, though, because that's typically, you know, white men. Renewable energy.
Lauren, how does, and this is a new topic to me, so I'm learning as well. I'm asking this as a general curiosity. So living wage jobs, does that belong within this environmental sustainability route? Like, I'm not trying to say I don't, I think that's great sport. I just want to make sure that that belongs in here. Like when we have the renewable energy, the green spaces, I don't know if you guys want to mention water or anything in here. It seems like the livable wage jobs maybe not be an environmental relation.
It doesn't have to be called out specifically. It's just that jobs within the clean energy workforce, like representation within jobs within the clean energy workforce, which are typically, higher education, higher skilled jobs that are living wage jobs. So that's why I said it, but not separate as an economic goal, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to find that tie. And okay, thank you. I was like, I don't disagree with it, but
yeah. So I mean, if we want to take it off, we can. But it's more just like an aside that's what those types of jobs typically are, right?
No, I think that's totally a good point. Something that gets looked over, of course. Like moving to sustainable technologies, they tend to be a little bit. They tend to be like college educated, which has its own class implications in the first place, and then those opportunities aren't given to everybody. So making sure that the workforce itself, whether they're living wage or not, has a good makeup of people who are actually representative of the state that we live in.
Yeah, it's specific to access and representation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is Alexia. Yeah, on that topic, though, I think it might be worth noting or saying in some way that, maybe lower income people word it in a more appropriate way, but, we want to try to provide access to clean food, to green spaces, to renewable energy, to populations that might not have access to that, monetarily or economically. So it's speaking to the same living wage jobs, but just from a different approach, right?
Right. Yeah, because even something like solar panels, which is advertised as a way to save money on your energy bill, that's just not an option for the people who would benefit most from a savings on their energy bill. So it's definitely increasing access to all these technologies as they get built out. If I'm understanding your point exactly, Alexia, I might have been a bit too broad.
No, you're right on my point perfectly well. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a great point. And if we could just consider a couple of other phrases, that we're looking for equitable and just climate solutions. And that way we're not specifically saying environmental justice, but we are, I think most people can agree that we're looking for just climate solutions. And if we wanted to use the terms equity and inclusion, those are other terms that I know are, they're terms that are being used in many of the environmental programs in both the public and private sector.
Totally. Yeah, it makes sense because I think it is also, important both that we use kind of, because I would say equity and inclusion tends to be, from what I've seen, more of a private company, like private for-profit use of their programs, but it's something that is pretty recognizable So I think that's definitely something that we can include in some of our language as we're looking at it.
So just to clarify here now, to make sure I'm reading this right. So we have all the way from the bullet points, food security, down to equitable and just climate solutions. What's kind of the overall, because just we were saying earlier with the race, income, we don't want to limit it. So if we put all these kind of under a universal idea, what would something like that look like? Or are you wanting to expand each individual bullet point? Does that make sense?
In my mind, we're basically defining or categorizing the areas of environmental impact and outcomes. So it'd be, does that make sense?
A little bit. So I guess the clear answer is no. So, all right, Bree, maybe you can speak here a little.
I'm wondering if this could be turned into one bullet point, like improve access to food, energy efficiency, renewable energy, green spaces for underserved and disadvantaged communities. And then another bullet point could be, promote equitable and just climate solutions. And under that, develop a clean energy workforce that supports a living wage.
Well, I would agree, but it did kind of sound like you just described our objective.
True.
So, yeah, I'm not sure, because the further we kind of group these together, because I kind of agree that this is more so defining what these disparities and inequities are, but I don't know.
I guess then as I'm thinking more about it, so there's probably going to be some things that we either don't think about, or something new ideas are going to come out in the next several years. How to make sure this is a non-exclusive list. Does that make better sense?
It makes sense, but I'm not. I guess I don't know how that fits in with the menu of options. Is kind of the problem that I'm seeing, because if we're not getting to the specifics, then we're just kind of laying out the topics, right? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think I'm expressing it super clearly.
Well, and I think we've got a little bit of a difference between, there's the idea of reducing, but again, as Kayla identified, there you really got to baseline the data and figure out, okay, what are you even reducing at all? But then there are things that Lauren is talking about that are really regardless of any kind of baselining of data, it's forward looking, and what could we be doing to improve access, for instance, to energy efficiency for underserved communities and things like that. And so, I'm wondering if at least for this initial round of coming up with suggestions for a menu of options, if we really, kind of try to target ourselves towards the future looking things that can be implemented now. You can also do that sort of baselining of data to see, where the historical inequities have been, and how do you maybe correct those. But I guess I'm thinking a little bit in terms of where we're at right now and trying to come up with a menu of option items for this month. Do we want to focus in on the going forward type aspect? And Alexia, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, Chris, I just add to your point, if we're looking at, menu option items here that are forward-looking and that support, sustainability in Nevada, one of the things that we need to look at then is, policy and funding. And in this way, because we can think of all of these, fantastic things that we would like to be the effect of a cause. Like, we want energy efficiency to be the effect of our work. But one of the causes to create this effect is going to need to be sort of a contract, you know, between the state of Nevada, the industry leaders, and then the people that you know, the stakeholders, right? So I think that maybe having some kind of like, you know, policy/funding, or even policy funding and innovative technology as one of those forward directional steps in this list might be something worth considering.
Yeah, I think I might be understanding, Kayla, your point now. Is it more so that you know, we don't want to be too, I guess, like direct and specific and say like this is the fence around this idea. More so, here is what we're trying to do as a description, and here are some of the examples that we've outlined that we can use to take forward to forward this objective, and make that more so a living document than rather these are the problems with with inequity, and this is how it exists.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm just having a hard time wording. It seems a little off. I'm just trying to help it structurally get there. So you have all the bullet points, you know, of just these different ideas where it's not like a full flat out sentence like the bottom three. So what are these three really getting at? Like you said, are they examples of things that we should be and can start collecting data in the future? Just kind of seeing where does it live within this objective without.
Right. And I think that's part of Alexa's point too of you know, where do we go with these ideas that we've kind of outlined, which no, I think is, yeah, I think that all very much makes sense. I think I got it all now. I don't know if everybody else is on the same page, but I think that makes sense of pretty much a description of, you know, we've got our objective, and then kind of fit these into more so bullet points of what they're trying to achieve within our objective. And then these are, I think, you know, energy efficiency access, to Kayla's point, is an outcome, but not, you know, an example of how to get there, to Alexa's point.
Question on that, and that all makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Are we, let's see, is our goal to be aspirational or practical in setting these goals? What would you say?
Well, I would say that we would have a little bit of both under that outline of, you know, energy efficiency access is inspirational, where we're like we're trying to get there, you know, and that's we may never, you know, hit it 100%. But the practical part would definitely be, you know, either like through legislative or planning through, you know, different groups that outline below it, because, you know, I think the practical part is the one that a lot of people struggle with. Of, this is what we want, but how do we get there?
Okay, thank you.
I think Lauren's got a hand raised.
Yeah, I had a comment, but maybe the first question is, what is the next step after this? Is it to identify action items under each bullet? Because I think that might help. In my mind, everything from food security to equitable and just climate solutions can be grouped into an increased access statement, basically, that would then flow with the other three or four.
Right.
What are these goals under objectives, or whatever we're calling these?
That's perfect, Lauren. Yeah, yeah. Now, are you guys aware of any other group within Nevada who's looking at this environmental justice topic?
Not with such a broad scope, no. Of course, there are many groups in Nevada that are looking at, you know, maybe their specific industry and the things that surround them.
I know it was a broad category of the Nevada Climate Initiative. And one of the, whatever they did, those listening sessions, it was one of those.
Right. So there's some private and public, like nonprofit kind of groups that are thinking about specifically for Indigenous people, but not with the scope, like someone said. And in Nevada State, we put a lot of emphasis on social equity, social justice. And so we're moving into that environmental justice realm, but really thinking about it more as how it relates to our students. So not so broadly as this document does.
So for Clark County, this is Sam, by the way. For Clark County, for our community plan, we're in the planning process, as most of you know, but one of our guiding principles is equity. And so through our advisory group, we've made sure to include, Indigenous groups, people who represent AARP and, the Latin Chamber of Commerce and all those different groups like that. So Clark County's trying to do it. We just don't know exactly what that looks like because we're still in the planning process.
The reason I was asking is since this is such a new topic in Nevada, want to make sure that we're on point and representing everyone that we're identifying here. I know the group you're representing today is a pretty monocolor group. I just want to make sure that we're able to attest to all minorities throughout and get that representation noted.
Someone that I might be able to bring in is I work with someone who is an organizer, part of, I don't know if anyone here has heard of NEJC or the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition, but they're doing similar work here with a very specific focus on environmental justice. So that's definitely someone that I could bring in to discuss what they're working on over there.
Yeah, or how to further involve additional groups into this discussion.
Totally.
This is Alexia again. I think because our stakeholders in this activity, are so broad and diverse, because we are literally dealing with an entire state. It might be something worth looking into, having, spin-off working groups with actual stakeholders, that represent the communities in Nevada. I think most of us in these groups represent industry to some degree, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit or governmental. And so I wouldn't consider myself a stakeholder in this workshop for those reasons. So again, it might be worth looking into creating workshops where we actually do, reach out to the community. Just Alexia again, I'm sorry. Another kind of layer to that, to creating stakeholder workshops. The University of Nevada, Reno, through their cooperative extension, has been for the last, I don't know how many years. I'm not even going to attempt to guess. They actually have been holding community workshops in, I think, every community in the state of Nevada, asking questions that are similar to what we're asking.
Okay.
Not the questions that we're asking, but I think they would be a very valuable resource to reach out to, because they're already plugged into those types of groups and the ability to cultivate them. So maybe, I don't know, just like a side note, to reach out to the University of Nevada, Reno's Cooperative Extension.
Totally. That's an awesome call out.
So is there
Yeah.
anything, go ahead, Noah.
No. Go ahead, Kayla.
I was just going to ask if is this for the most part, pretty encompassing, several bullet points for this objective? Is there anything large that's not represented anywhere?
Alexia, again, I feel like I'm always taking up all the oxygen. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Love it.
I think I alluded to it earlier, but is it too broad a scope for this group to look at inequities and disparities as they deal with, not just the people of Nevada, but, the actual land use in Nevada and all of the other life that exists in this state, right? So I don't see that addressed in the bullet points here. Environmental conservation and legacy contamination management, and other environmental impacts to the actual earth of Nevada. Is that too broad a scope for this group?
I think since this is just, see, I'm going to backtrack on that. I'm not sure. Is there anywhere else that it would fit better? Or we can make a note here, and then when Chris, Noah, and I go through all 5 objectives, we can see if it fits somewhere else. But I think it certainly is good to note somewhere.
I think that works. Yeah, maybe a footnote. Yeah.
Well, it's a huge distinction that you're making there. There can be a direct, you all know this, there can be a direct clash between wanting to do things that make things equitable for humans versus make things equitable for other living species on the earth. And so I do like that concept of conservation, but I think it muddies the water a little bit to include it here. I think it's more important to, and other people can weigh in. I think it's important to include. I feel like it should be its own thing. I don't know. I'm not saying that humans and other organisms can't live somehow together on this earth and move forward in a sustainable manner. I do think that's a goal. It just feels big for this one, a big goal for this one group. This one little subgroup here.
Well, and that feels like almost it's a goal for the entire stakeholder group, all of sustainability and environmental science related professions. So we can even, add this into commentary in the introduction to the document. We'll see if it needs to have its own bullet point objective, something of the sort. Because I agree, it kind of muddies the water a little bit just for this one objective.
I guess I am rethinking it. You almost can't be sustainable without providing habitat for other organisms living on the face of the earth, right? So they are related. You have to have some kind of conservation at the same time you're doing all this. Maybe the problem is that it's kind of a loaded concept for some people, and I'm trying to just keep the loaded concepts out of things as much, try to keep them separated. So, I don't know. I debate back and forth.
I agree with trying to keep the loaded concepts out. And I'm not totally adverse to anything any of you are saying. I think I think in a lot of ways it comes down to semantics. I think it's important to state what we assume is obvious. Really, I think that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get to.
So maybe we could work some words in here, or is the footnote? I haven't read it carefully.
Just impacts to non-human considerations. You know, wildlife and habitat protection, natural resources, etc. And I guess the other thing too is just to remember that, you know, none of the list of 5 objectives that are being worked on by this sustainability working group are exclusive. It's not like, oh, this is the only chance we ever get to deal with any of this. You know, I think that this issue, this particular objective, popped up in the environmental justice context, but you know, we can broaden that or keep it as narrow as we think makes sense for the partnership going forward. You know, again, if you were on some of my earlier calls, I'm just kind of looking for also, you know, where can we put together action items that we can achieve and, you know, get some successes and kind of move forward. And some of those things like non-human considerations, I think, you know, that's just going to be interwoven in everything we do across the entire partnership going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really do agree with that environmental conservation really does have to be interwoven with all of the categories, all the groups, all the teams.
So what if Bree and I work some kind of commentary about this subnote into the intro or somewhere into the menu of options document? Do you think that would be?
I think if it's stated somewhere that probably covers, just so that it's an acknowledgement, because I mean, we're all working on this together. Our minds are in this document, but in 5 or 10 years, this is going to be a different group of people. And again, I think it's totally obvious that, you know, sustainability is synonymous with, you know, natural conservation. But again, you know, I do think that semantics are actually very important. And even if it's not, you know, called out as its own particular issue, stating it with clear language somewhere, I think, is important. And I think that would sort of, you know, put an end to that conversation and allow us to move forward with action items. But it also defines our parameters, right? Like, we don't want to do something, you know, that deals with inequities and disparities for humans that takes away from, you know, the sustainability of the earth that we live on. It's just, it's a boundary that we can't cross. So yeah, I think just verbalizing it somewhere so that it's stated is probably a good solution.
Okay, Bree and I will work on that. Yeah, and that's, again, why we had you guys create that definition of sustainability. You know, there's so many different definitions and meanings, connotations, that the more that we specify in this plan how it relates to this group and the projects that come out, I think is going to be helpful long-term. Also, Alexia or anyone else, if you guys have, you know, commentary or sentences, structure that you would like to have put into the commentary, feel free to send that our way as well. All right, so are there any other major topics that you guys want to discuss or add today before the first real main draft of this document comes out? Is everything represented here that you guys would like?
I put in chat a while back, but I don't know if we want to expand the second bullet to include air quality, perhaps extreme heat. And then someone mentioned water previously, so I don't know about that one either. But those would be the only things I see missing. Again, it makes them more broad, but I don't know how we don't include air quality.
Yep, no, that's
air quality is important.
Just a little.
Awesome. Well, we're running up on time here, so unless there are any other last minute comments, I've really enjoyed this discussion. It's really awesome to talk to people who care about this issue, and I think, these are within an hour we've got some pretty important issues down on paper, and I think in some pretty good language. So I'm super proud of it. But after this meeting, I think probably later this week we'll send out this sheet with some cleaned up wording, some cleaned up formatting to get everyone's feedback and comments, expounding where things need to be added or adding any other thoughts that didn't come up within this small 1 hour meeting is totally cool. So we'll be doing that, but otherwise, if there's anything else that comes up, definitely feel free to reach out. But I don't know if Chris or Kayla, you have anything to add before we go?
Nope, just like you said, we'll follow this up with an email with, try to clean this up a little bit, make it make sense based on the conversation, and email that out, and just ask that when you receive it, if you've come up with any new ideas or have comments and changes that you'd like to see made, provide that to us as soon as you can, because we're going to be working on this compressed schedule in the month of March to kind of wrap up the menu of option items, the action items, and the recommendations, so that it can all be going into that final document that's shared with everybody at the summit at the end of March.
Awesome. Well, all right. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you, guys. Great meeting.
Thank you.